Welcome, my dear ones. This is Tracy Anderson Askew, your host for the Transform Your Birth podcast, changing your mind about birth one story at a time. Each week, we'll be exploring a birth story through the lens of what birth can teach us. I'll be digging deep into each story so you can learn what it is that can change the way a birth unfolds. We can't control birth, but we can influence it. So listen in to find out how. Enjoy. Kahlia decided she didn't want to overload herself with too much information and only did the Transform Your Birth course to prepare herself and her partner. She then goes on into labour with a baby who is rotated and posterior, which sees her in labour for 4 days. She manages this with the support of her partner and midwife. Finally, when things start to heat up, she ends up pushing him out quite quickly, and he is 4.6 kilos. A great story to discount the idea that babies grow too big for their mothers. Kahlia reminds us all not to overthink things. Hi, wonderful people. Good to have you again with us this week. Today we have the lovely Kahlia, who had little Harry about 6 months ago, and Kahlia's offered to tell us her story. So Kahlia, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, when you were pregnant with little Harry, how were you feeling about the pregnancy? How were you feeling about the idea of giving birth, and what sort of preparation did you do?
When I was pregnant, to be honest, I wasn't really a big fan of being pregnant. I thought I'd be this glamorous pregnant woman, but I was just a bit of a swollen, angry girl.
Not so pleasant.
No. And to be honest, I wasn't really worried about the birth at all. It wasn't something that really crossed my mind. I guess I purposely tried not to worry about it because I knew there was nothing that I could do about it. I was going to be birthing this baby whether or not I had a choice. So it's kind of just something I tried to not think about, and then it kind of didn't really worry me. So
awesome. Decent dose of denial, darling. Fabulous.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
That's good. You're not overthinking it, at least.
No, yeah.
So did that change at all as you got closer towards the end?
No. So I was getting married about a week before I was due to have the baby. So I kind of just,
Could you squeeze anything more in?
Yeah, I kind of just put everything into little boxes. So I was like, right, well, I've got to worry about the wedding first. So I tried to not think about the birth and just think about the wedding. And then after the wedding was done, I was like, then I kind of, I guess, allowed myself to think about it, but still just tried not to worry and just what was going to happen was going to happen.
Ah, interesting. So you did do some preparation though?
Yes, I did. So I did your Transform Parenting birth class.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I was one of the most heavily pregnant women in the class. So we did your kind of weekend course, and then we had the homework of the not meditation, but the kind of thinking exercises that we were
the practices and the breathing
the practices.
Yeah.
I like that you call them practices and not meditation, because every time I hear the word meditation, I get a bit of an eye twitch.
Yeah, it's why I call them relaxation practices, because people often say, oh, I don't meditate, I've tried, that doesn't work. And I say, well, this isn't meditation, this is relaxation practice. And everybody's got to be able to do that because your body needs it.
Yes. So we didn't do it as often as what we had hoped. We have a very needy dog, so every time we tried to sit and be calm and relax, he just wanted to lick our faces. But we did get a chance to do it a fair few times. On our honeymoon, we did it. We went down to the coast for a few days without the dog. And we just kind of sat in our hotel room and did it. We both just fell asleep, but but it was really nice.
Yeah. So what changes? I mean, you weren't worried about it too much.
Here's the baby.
Yeah. Bring him in. Hello, little Harry. Oh my God.
Hello.
If you're listening to this, you're missing out on seeing the most gorgeous little fellow. Hello, Harry.
Hello. He's very curious, very grabby.
Yeah. Hi. He's gorgeous. Beautiful. So you weren't worried about the birth. How did doing the course change the way, like change you or prepare you? How did you feel at the end, and what was that like?
I think because I wasn't worried about it, I had chosen to not think about it, I was actually very unprepared. So I had no idea what to expect. And I think by doing the course, I still wasn't worried, but I knew what to expect. So I had the same mindset of just going to relax and calm, but
Yeah.
I was informed. So I
Yeah.
kind of knew the different stages of like what I'll go through during the labor. I knew kind of what I could say yes and no to on the day. And I kind of knew what my body was doing, which kind of I guess made me even more relaxed, because I wasn't like, oh my gosh, I need to Google like what this is that I'm experiencing. I was kind of like, oh no, Tracy, talked about this. I know what it is.
Yeah, you're able to read the situation better.
Yeah.
Mm. What other changes or what other things did you learn that you were really glad you learned that you think ultimately made a difference to your birth?
Actually, the biggest thing that I got out of your course was the mouth breathing.
Okay.
I was a massive mouth breather before your course.
Yeah.
And now I breathe through my nose. But I think that was actually,
that's huge in itself. Going from being a mouth breather to a nose breather, that changes the exchange of gases quite dramatically between carbon dioxide and oxygen. What changes did you notice happen when you started to reverse that?
I really focused on it during labor, and I found it really kind of brought my heart rate down, I guess, because I really actively thought about it, and it kind of was able to calm me.
Yeah.
And when I was having the contractions, I had something to focus on other than the pain, I guess.
Yeah.
I was just focused on my breathing instead, rather than being like, oh my gosh, this is killing me.
Yeah. I get heaps of feedback about the breathing and the way that I teach breathing. And by the way, just to be clear, we're not teaching breathing techniques. We're actually teaching optimal physiological breathing, which is breathing in the way the body's designed to breathe to give the most oxygen, which, by the way, is highly understood. A lot of breathing practices can promote deep breathing, which for some people are fine if it slows down their breathing, but for others, they can actually hyperventilate. And hyperventilation leads to less oxygen, not more. So when people understand the importance of breathing volume and how much you breathe in, nose breathing plus good posture, gentle and slow, then it really does shift not just your thinking about managing labour, but your whole physiological response to labour shifts, because you're now optimally oxygenating a big, powerful muscle doing a big, powerful job. So it's very powerful. I get so much feedback about the breathing. Yeah, that's really interesting. What did your partner get out of the course, Kahlia?
He had no idea what to expect at all. No idea about labour, birth, pregnancy, parenting. I think the first baby he had held was our friend's baby who just had it them a year ago, other than maybe his little sister when she was born. He loved the checklist of I think it was the 10 things not to do.
Yeah.
He actually shared it with his brother, who just had a baby 6 weeks ago in the UK.
That's good.
But yeah, he really liked that, just having a really clear, defined list that he could kind of work from.
Yeah.
I think he was shocked by, I don't remember a lot of the pain, but I think he was shocked by watching me go through that.
Yeah.
Which he was somewhat prepared for, but I think, I guess it's always going to be a little bit shocking.
Yeah. Well, the reality of the intensity of what it is that a woman's going through, which is very primal, and you can make very primal sounds, can be very overwhelming. And so for people who aren't prepared, that's the sort of stuff that can really put them into a stress response, which, by the way, can then influence the labouring mother. If she senses somebody around her is stressed, stress is contagious. It can influence that labour. So, Well, let's fast forward now and talk about the birth and how it unfolded for you.
Yeah. So about 4 days before I actually, I guess, had Harry, I had really, really, really bad back pain. And didn't really know what it was, because I didn't know that back labours were a thing. So I never once got any typical like contraction pains in my front. I only ever had the lower back pain.
Yeah.
And that was kind of coming in waves it was every 10 minutes, day and night for 4 days.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I didn't really understand what was going on. And I just assumed it was like, I guess Braxton Hicks or practice. And I was getting really kind of cranky that I was going through all of this and it was essentially for nothing. So I was pretty shitty.
Which isn't actually technically true. Every contraction you have is contributing to the final outcome. But what Kahlia is describing there is what's called posterior labour. So when babies are rotated and their spine is on the mother's spine and they're rubbing on her spine, instead of feeling most of the intensity and the tightenings at the front of the uterus, she's feeling it at the back, which can make it very, very uncomfortable because the baby's rubbing on the back. And of course, the way the head then presents to the cervix isn't as optimal, which means that she can be having contractions, but the flat surface of the baby's head doesn't kind of act as a wedge to open the door. And so posterior labours can be typically longer. So women who are in labour for, days with these sorts of sensations coming and going, did you ever at any point contact your midwife and get any sort of advice to see if you could actually help turn the baby? Was there any support that way?
Well, we knew he was posterior kind of through all the last stages. So we did I did a lot of swimming.
Right.
Did a lot of rebozo.
Yeah, cool.
But we kind of knew going into it that he was still posterior. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you did that prior to those 4 days of long labour?
Yeah. So we had done that kind of for the last few weeks, I guess.
You didn't want to move.
He did not want to move. He was comfy. But yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so were you in contact with the hospital at that point? Did you get any support during that point?
I did go in and see my midwife at one point because I wasn't sleeping. So she gave me some like sleeping pills to see if I could get some sleep. I think she kind of knew that something was coming, so she wanted me to be as well rested as I could going into it. I was also sleeping on the couch because I was trying to get my husband to get some sleep because I knew going into it he was going to have a long day as well. So I didn't sleep, but we did try. And I did a little bit more swimming just to kind of try and keep going forward, see what we could do. There was a website I think called Spinning Babies.
Yeah, spinningbabies.com. Yeah.
So did a few of the kind of different things on there. But yeah.
The baby positioning is one of those things you can't control. Sometimes you can influence it by doing some of these techniques and rebozo and shaking the belly and leaning forward and doing a whole lot of things to help reposition that baby. But ultimately, did he move at all, Kahlia?
No. He didn't. And when the day kind of came, they got to a point where I made Dave call the midwife, and I was like, I can't keep having contractions every 10 minutes. I was like, for what feels like it's going to be the rest of my life. I was like, I need to do something.
Yeah.
So Alice, who was my midwife, and I had Lou, who was my student midwife, suggested we go into the birthing centre, and they were just going to have a look and see what was going on. And then I went in, and I think I was 5 centimetres dilated.
Okay. Yeah.
So they kind of said,
"All right, that is progress."
They're like, you're not gonna go home now. They're like, you're here now. And I was like, oh, okay. And I think I was there for a few hours. My water still hadn't broken. And Alice just went to check, gave me a vaginal exam just to check and see, what was happening. And as she went to check, my waters I had a contraction at the same time and my waters broke then. And she said when my waters kind of broke, he slipped down into place.
Right. So he rotated at that point, did he?
Yeah.
Oh, yay.
Yeah.
I bet that was a relief.
I still only had the back pain.
Okay.
So but it was nice knowing that he wasn't, because of what you were saying before about the head positioning.
Yeah.
They said his head slipped kind of into the right spot.
Yeah, to help open the door a bit more.
Yeah.
So what sort of progress did you make after, like how quickly did you dilate after that happened?
I'm not sure, because I said no to any further vaginal exams after that. I just didn't really want people probing around down there. And I also felt like it was just kind of getting in the way of what I felt like I needed to do.
Yeah.
Because I was in and out of the bath and the shower. I didn't want to go and then, lay down on a bed or have someone come and do that. So I just said no.
Yeah. That's a great point right there. People often don't realise that they can say no to vaginal examinations. So one of the questions I get my families to ask prior to the labour, when they're still going in for their appointments, is the question, under what circumstances would you want me to have a vaginal examination? It's a really good question to ask, because when you understand when it might be really appropriate, then it's much easier to say, no, thank you, I'm not interested in one on the day. And I don't think it's a good idea for women to have too many, for many reasons. One is infection, but primarily because it actually disturbs the labour. It disturbs a woman responding physiologically to her labour if she's having to get in an uncomfortable and vulnerable position to have a gloved hand go into her vagina to see what the cervix is doing. And of course, it can also mess with her head, because she starts to hear what that number might be. And that could be encouraging, like that can happen, but it can also be very discouraging if you think you're further than what you are. And I also believe, and I'm pretty sure I've seen this happen a couple of times myself when I've been in birth, where women can close up a little bit with too many vaginal examinations. So they can actually go backwards, because it is a very vulnerable procedure and it can be very triggering for some women as well. So it's good to know that you don't have to go ahead and have a vaginal examination. You can say no, like Kahlia did, and just, had the freedom then to respond to your labour accordingly. So what happened?
I do remember you saying in the classes that, oh God, what was it? I've just forgotten. You just said it before.
Women feeling vulnerable?
When you can, the situations of when you have your appointments beforehand and you ask them, when are you definitely going to want to do it and when are you kind of not? And I knew that my baby wasn't in trouble. Yeah. So I knew that it wasn't completely necessary. It was just kind of for them. And I also didn't want to be disappointed by the number. Yeah. So I knew that if she did it, I was going to want to know what the number was, regardless of whether she's going to tell me or not. I knew I was going to want to know. Yeah, and I didn't want to be upset if it wasn't what I wanted it to be. So I just did not. I just said no.
Well done. That's great. So what happened then?
I was still in and out from the bath and the shower. I had moved out of the bath because I knew that being in the bath too long might slow things down. Mm-hmm. So I got up and I went and stood in the shower for hours and hours and hours. That's when I was glad it was at the birth centre, because I didn't want that water bill. And I had, at that point, the gas. Mm-hmm. I think less for pain relief and more for having something to kind of focus on. I had it on quite low and just my mum was there, and I had my mum and Dave kind of swapping in and out, being in there with me. And then I had kind of just had enough of standing and I wanted to kind of sit down for a while. So I went into the bath. And that's when I had a bit of a temper tantrum and yelled at everyone to get me an epidural.
Okay.
And that's when I knew I was in transition.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I just knew I felt I couldn't do it anymore. I was cranky. I had started yelling at people. And then I went and got in the bath and I realised, oh, hang on. I remember this as being one of the stages that you had mentioned. And it actually, I realised I was in transition.
Yeah. And when you found out you were transitioned, did that make a difference to your crankiness?
I think so. It was either that or kind of the relaxation of the bath. But my midwife had gone home at that point to have dinner and a bit of a rest, because I think she'd gone over the amount of time she could stay. So I had a secondary midwife in there who was organising the epidural, and I had to be transferred to another room. And I have a shocking fear of needles. So I think the first stage of a potential epidural was giving her my hand or my arm or something to put a line in.
Yeah.
And I just flat out refused because I didn't want the needle.
Yeah.
But then I was yelling at her to hurry up and organise the epidural. And she was like, whoa, you need this in order to get that. But I would not let her bring this needle anywhere near me. And then I kind of I think I went into a bit of a trance because I couldn't move. I was kind of just like really, really still and in the bath and really quiet and just kind of sitting there and did not want to move. And then I think in my head I knew that something was about to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you asked for the epidural, but of course you were too far gone by then to get it.
Yes. And my student midwife, she obviously knew, and she and I said no to obviously any further exams, and I didn't want any more of the fetal monitoring either.
Yeah.
Because I found that quite invasive when I was kind of in the bath or in the moment of something, because they were, they've got to kind of really get in there.
Yeah.
And I also knew that it was close. So even if, they did find something, he was coming out anyway. So it wouldn't have really changed my path forward.
Yeah.
But my student midwife said, well, why don't you reach in and you just check? And I said, oh, there's nothing there. There's just a big bubble. And then, and it turns out that was actually his head.
And what was that like when you felt, so you didn't realise it was the head?
No, I thought it was just a bubble. I don't know why there'd be a bubble up there. But yeah, I just thought it was a weird bubble.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was his head.
I'm always amused when I hear, the different things that go on in women's minds at that time, particularly the transition period, which is the sort of space between opening the door, which is first stage of labour, and then pushing a baby out, which is the second stage of labour. And this is the time where women often get a bit tetchy and they start to want to go home, or give me the drugs, or I've had enough of this. They often utter these escapist comments. And what's actually going on, I call that the cracking of the shell from the woman into the mother. She wants to get off the bus, but she can't. She's got to keep going. And she gets a bit frustrated at people around her, because what she's really wanting to do is, get off this bus, and I don't want to do this anymore. But she has to start to push through to realise that she's much more powerful and significantly stronger than what she thinks. And it's that process of having to push through is what helps to strengthen her in that next phase, to be ready to push a baby out and then to mother. So it's a very significant time transition. And all women need in that time is just to be reassured, and for people to hold the space for her to be able to struggle like that. And for people like partners or some doctors, some midwives, they want to rescue, they want to do something, but actually one of the best things you can do is just let it happen and hold the space and really believe in her ability to get through. Now, women in transition struggle not knowing they're in transition, but once they know that they're nearly at the end, they're often fine to keep pushing through. But it's the not knowing that can get to them. So did you start to realise at that point? You said you had a sense something was changing and something was about to happen.
I knew as soon as I started yelling at people that was it. That was the moment that my partner was eating crunchy cheesels in my ear, and I yelled at him to just get out.
Geez, I must remember to put that in the not to do list. Do not eat crunchy cheesels.
No crunchy food. Yeah.
In the not to do list, one of the things I tell partners is don't smell and don't talk to her during contractions. And that eating crunchy cheesels, which smell and make noise, would be very irritating.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny.
So that was the moment I knew I was in transition, just because I hadn't been, I guess, cranky the whole day through all of it. Yeah. And at the point that I just kind of snapped.
Yeah.
I knew.
There was your cracking of your shell.
Yeah.
The mother beast was emerging.
Yeah.
So tell us about second stage, Kahlia. What was that like?
Is that the pushing stage?
Yeah.
Very, very quick.
Oh.
So my pushing stage was about 20 minutes.
Wow. That's very quick for a first.
Yeah. So I had, I think, only 3 pushes. My student midwife had sent a quick text to my kind of main midwife who was at home having lunch just down the road and was like, she started pushing. You probably want to start making your way back here.
Yeah.
And I had always thought, obviously, you only really see births in movies and it's very glamorized. But when women were like grunting, I always thought, oh, it's a bit dramatic. Like, I'm not going to do that. But the first push, it was just like this animalistic grunt that just kind of shocked me. And I was like, oh, God. But yeah, I couldn't help it. It just kind of, you don't have control over it. And the other thing I'd seen in movies was, you have like the doctors and all the people around who were telling you to push. I thought it was something that I had to initiate and I had to make the effort to do, but my body just did it.
Yeah.
And the sound just kind of came with it as I kind of relaxed into it. I actually thought I had to do a giant poop.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, he's not coming because I just need a poop.
Yeah.
But no, he was coming.
Yeah, a lot of women often make that connection. They think, oh, I feel like I need to poo.
Yeah.
I remember when I was having my first son, I said that to my midwife and she was following me into the toilet and said, what are you doing? Go away. I'm doing a poo. She said, oh, we're just making sure there's not a baby on the end of it. It's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that whole that process of pushing him out was very, very quickly. And how was your recovery when he landed? What was that like? Because that can be quite a shock when babies come quite quick.
I didn't find it a shock at all. I think I kind of had the first push and I felt him kind of move down.
Yeah.
Second push, his like head came out.
Yeah.
And then I kind of had a bit of a panic and I was like, well, what do I do? And my student midwife was like, just wait. And then I had my third push and he kind of all of him just kind of jiggled out. Yeah. And because he was a water birth, I never kind of clicked that I had to pick him up myself.
Mm-hmm.
And my midwife was like, well, pick him up. And I was like, doesn't someone for me? Because I'd only ever like seen movies. And she was like, no. She was like, just pick him up. I was like, but he's slippery. Anyway, so I just picked him up out of the water. And then I think I was a little bit in shock because I was like, oh my gosh, like I had never thought at the end of this I would have a baby. Like, that wasn't something that I guess I thought about. It was kind of the pregnancy, the labor, and I was like, oh shit, shivers, now I've got a baby.
This is a baby.
Yeah. So
what was that moment of meeting like?
I feel like I was a little bit disconnected from myself. Dave's got a picture of me kind of sitting in the bath holding him and I just look like a bit of a stunned mullet. I didn't really know what to do. I just kind of sat there for a while. But yeah, it was very strange. It kind of felt like I was looking at myself from above. Yeah, very out of body experience. Yeah.
So as you look back now on your bonding period, Kahlia, can you describe how it sort of unfolded for you, your sense of connection with him?
I think I really felt the sense of connection when I kind of made my way out of the bath. I went and I sat on the bed and I just kind of we laid him on my stomach and let him do that kind of baby crawl up to the breast. And I think that's when I felt the biggest connection because he was really, really struggling to make his way up there. Wow. He was grunting, wriggling, and I was like, this is quite cute. Then eventually he made his way up there and I breastfed him for, I think, an hour or something. We just kind of laid there and him on there. And it was really nice. And everyone was just kind of doing their thing around me, sitting quietly, kind of pottering. And we just kind of sat there in our little bubble and I just kind of laid there. I think I might have dozed, I don't know, but just laid there for a long time with him on me, which was really lovely.
Wow, that sounds lovely. Yeah, it's amazing. Babies are wired to look for the breast. And when we place them on a mother's stomach and we give them the time and the space, they show the same reflexes that any newborn would show. A cat or a dog or anything, they all know that their next job is to look for the nipple, and they go searching for the breast. And when babies are given the time and the space to do that, it can promote really good attachment, which then can mean less pain for the mother and better milk supply and all of that sort of stuff. So that's a beautiful thing to watch, and to have the space and the time to do that. Yeah. Was there any issues with the placenta or anything afterwards you want to share?
I had the injection to
Bring
get
the
it
placenta on.
Yeah. I think it was in your course, but I remember you saying, situations where you might want it, you might not. And you had mentioned that, if you are completely and utterly exhausted, you've been in there for a long time. I'd had 4 days of early labor, of not really eating or sleeping. So when they asked me if I wanted it, my immediate reaction was no, because I didn't want the needle. But then I think I came back in 5 minutes and I was like, oh, actually, I've had a really rough couple of days. I'm not sure what kind of energy I've got left. So then I said yes. And then it just kind of slid out.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Fantastic. Then they went and put it on a step and everyone was taking photos of it. And I was like, oh, that's gross.
I always tell people to make sure you have a look at your placenta, because it's an amazing thing. It's been the life supply line, for your whole baby, for your baby from your body. And it's quite an amazing piece of creation to look at. But of course, some people find them a little bit gross, but I think they're fascinating. And they always check the placenta to make sure that it's come out intact, that no part of the placenta has been left behind. So, yeah, that's an important thing for your carers to do. Yeah. So, Kahlia, you had a very straightforward birth, a baby that was rotated for a long part of it, but ultimately was able to turn and make his way into the world quite quickly in the end, which shows you that every contraction was ultimately contributing to the final outcome. What did you learn about yourself?
I actually should probably also mention that he was a beast of a baby. He was
was he?
Just shy of 10 pounds.
Wow.
Had a 38 centimeter head.
Yeah.
And everyone thought that the scales are broken when they tried to weigh him. But I think I just kind of learnt that my body knows what to do, and that I'm, I think, much tougher than I probably gave myself credit for. I didn't actively have to do anything. My body just kind of did it for me, and I was just kind of along for the ride, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, birth is wired into the body. It's wired into the autonomic nervous system, and learning to trust that system is important, and getting in or working on things that could get in the way of you really being able to surrender to it and allow it to happen is also very important. When you look back at that process of, your preparation, how you changed in your level of readiness, what do you think what would you tell a pregnant woman about birth that you learnt that really you think would be worth passing on?
I think that one of the most important things I heard when I was pregnant, and I'm not sure who told me, but they said that your body's not going to grow something it can't handle. So and I think that that's really what kind of got me through, is I knew that my body wasn't going to, grow something or like grow a baby that I couldn't deal with.
Yeah.
So that's really kind of what got me through. And I think the only kind of birth preparation class that I did was yours. I didn't want to be doing, endless hours of research. I didn't want to be constantly Googling. I just wanted, I guess, one big source of information that I went to And I didn't want to be, I guess I didn't want to be overloaded with information.
Yeah.
I knew that I would get the information I needed. I knew that I'd be as informed as I could be without kind of bringing in all of these outside sources that could just add extra worries, extra stresses that I didn't really need. So I think being informed, but not overloaded.
I think that's really wise, because the biggest challenge I find with pregnant women and also new parents is they Google everything, which then gives them an overload of information, and they don't always have the experience to know and be able to filter out what's going to be useful and what isn't. So that mental overload stuff is huge, not just for birth, for parenting as well. I find it with my new parents. So that was pretty wise for you not to do that. Obviously, the course that I gave you, it's very well distilled information of what's essential to know that can move the needle for birth, which is very much what this podcast is about too. What changes birth and what you can do, the how to approach birth is what people need. They don't need to know everything that can go wrong. That's what carers need to know. Doctors and midwives, that's their job. You don't have to do their job. You just need to do your job, which is to learn what you can do to work with birth, not against it. So that's, and I think
really knowing the questions to ask really helped. So I didn't need to know what could go wrong, but knowing the questions to ask, like, in what situation would you want to do this?
Yeah.
I think really helped.
Yeah, it does. It helps you to navigate the path on the day, because you've had those conversations when you are in more of a state to have those conversations, not in labour. Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful, Kahlia. That's a lovely, inspiring story for people. I'm very curious about the size of your baby. Was anybody worried about your baby getting big like that? Was there any identification that Harry was as big as what he was?
No. So I had my last scan at 20 weeks.
Yeah.
And then opted to not have any more. And all of my kind of, I think the fundal measurements were all just kind of on track.
Yeah.
I think potentially because he was posterior, he was kind of tucked further in. So they weren't aware that he was going to be big. But I think by not having any further scans after 20 weeks, I've had a lot of friends who didn't end up having big babies, but they had quite a lot of continual scans. They were had their babies privately, and their kind of doctors or OBGYNs had said, your baby's looking big, you might, need to opt for a C-section, or you might need these kind of interventions. And then they kind of really got in their heads about it, and they were really nervous and scared that they had this big baby. Whereas I had no idea. I didn't need any scans up to 20 weeks, so I chose to not have any. And I don't know any different. I've not had a baby before, so I don't know what a big baby feels like, and I don't know what a small baby feels like. So just knew what my baby felt like.
You just know what your baby feels like.
Yeah. Yep.
It's a really difficult thing for some women to overcome, is the fear of big babies. And as I say to women, babies are beautifully designed to mold into the birth canal, because so their heads are made up of plates which are connected by soft tissue, and with the right pressures of the mother, particularly if she's upright and active with those right pressures, the baby's head starts to go in and compress and mold and shrink so it can go through the pelvis. And of course, the pelvis expands. It's not a solid bone. It's connected with big ligaments that soften through pregnancy with a hormone called relaxin, making the pelvis really flexible. So when women are upright and active and leaning forward, they tend to really have the capacity for the mechanics of birth to really open and expand that labour and the birth canal, so that the baby can navigate its way through. So I like to help people to understand it's not big babies that get stuck. It's malpositioned babies that get stuck. Little babies can get stuck. So if you are being identified as having a big baby, well, firstly, you don't know actually technically the size of the baby until it's actually born, because there can be up to 1 kilo of difference just by looking at an ultrasound. It's not an accurate measurement. We can't always really tell a baby in utero as to how big it is. So even that information can be a little bit misleading. But doctors are there to identify any risks, and big babies in their mind is a risk. So that decision not to have a scan was probably really helpful for you, not having that fear placed in your mind about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one that I work hard to help women to overcome those sorts of fears and to just trust their bodies, unless there's, any sort of metabolic issue with undiagnosed, unmanaged gestational diabetes or something like that. For the most part, Mother Nature's way too smart to grow a baby too big for the mother. I don't think she's that silly.
No, yeah.
All right. Well, Kahlia, I really appreciate you sharing your story. It's a lovely, inspiring story of a mother having a big baby, a lot of early labour, which can really do a woman's head in. So even overcoming that and getting to the point where you're able to ultimately get in the water, enjoy the benefits of being in the birth centre, having really, really good care and a partner who knew what they were doing, and then ultimately pushing a very large baby out very, very quickly. You must be proud. And having little Harry, it's a gift for you to share such a wonderful story. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next week for another wonderful story from the Transform Parenting, Transform Your Birth podcast. Take care. Bye-bye. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe and share this podcast. Transform Parenting is a childbirth and parenting education organisation that supports families through pregnancy all the way through the first 7 years of parenting. Why not watch our free webinar on Keeping Relaxed and Excited About Birth, where we discuss the 3 most important things that will change a birth. You'll find us at our website on www.transformparenting.com.au. Thanks for listening.